So, hello, I'm Vitra Deonarine, marketing manager for the world-famous Angostura Bitters. Angostura is based in Trinidad and Tobago, where I was born and raised. Trinidad and Tobago, if you've never been there, is a beautiful twin island republic on the southernmost end of the Caribbean, very close to Venezuela, which is important to the history of Angostura Bitters. Beyond beautiful Caribbean beaches, we have a diverse mixing pot of culture, which comes together in vibrant celebration of food, music, yes, food, music, art, and traditions such as Juve and Carnival. We certainly know how to party, or as we say in local slang, fet. And if anyone has been to Trinidad Carnival, you certainly know what I'm talking about. Angostura is a source of great pride for our local people, as our bottle of bitters, with its iconic oversized label, can be found almost anywhere in the world. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with it. I started with Angostura 20 years ago on the bottling line after studying for my BSc in marketing, and management, and MSc in marketing. I joined a graduate program at Angostura and never looked back. I have worked in a number of roles at the company before taking over our marketing for our flagship brand, Angostura Bitters. And like any good Trini, I have Angostura in my blood because we produce not only bitters, but rum. Angostura's history did not start in Trinidad and Tobago, though, but in the port town of Angostura, Venezuela, now called Ciudad Boulevard. Hence, the closeness between Venezuela and Trinidad was so important in the history of the product. It was there that Dr. Johann Siegert, who was a general surgeon in Simon Bolivar's Revolutionary Army, first developed the Siegert combination of herbs and spices that would become Angostura aromatic bitters almost 200 years ago. Its initial purpose was as a medicinal tincture to cure stomach ailments of the troops fighting in the war, and its reputation for doing so quickly traveled around the world as visiting doctors would dock in Venezuela and prescribe it to their crew for seasickness. There, the pink gin was born, but that's another story. In the 1870s, due to civil unrest in Venezuela, the Siegert family fled to Trinidad, where Angostura has been made ever since. For hundreds of years, bartenders the world over have been using Angostura bitters as a dash of seasoning that binds, balances, and enhances their drinks. At home, Angostura bitters is also commonly used in our cuisine. We marinate meat, seafood, add it to ice cream, juice, etc. But that is very common in Trinidad and the rest of the Caribbean. It's not widely known to the rest of the world. But there are many uses to Angostura bitters. It's extremely versatile. Of course, when you have an iconic brand, you are naturally very protective of it. And we've been very careful with our innovation. In fact, it was actually over 180 years before another flavor of bitters, Angostura Orange Bitters, was added to the lineup in 2007. 13 years later, in 2020, we launched our latest innovation, Angostura Cocoa Bitters, which uses nibs of the indigenous Trinitario cocoa. And this Trinitario cocoa is what gives Angostura Cocoa Bitters top notes of rich, floral, nutty cocoa. This, combined with an intoxicating infusion of aromatic botanicals, brings new layers of depth and complexity to cocktails, such as the classic espresso martini. And I invite you to visit our booth, C43 in Hall 20, to experience some amazing cocktails using Angostura bitters. And I know you're probably wondering why I'm giving all this background, but you'll understand soon enough. Trinitario cocoa is very important to us as a country and to Angostura Cocoa Bitters. One of the things that I'm personally very proud of as a Trini is that we launched Angostura Cocoa Bitters as a celebration of our provenance and commitment to sustainable agriculture on the islands. I know many of the Trinidad diaspora around the world also found the launch of Angostura Cocoa Bitters as a source of pride in what their homeland creates and now exports on the world stage. Creating a product which uses an agricultural product and then scaling this limited resource in a sustainable way is something you may have come across in your business endeavors. So we'd like to share this case study on how we've approached it. Some background information on the Trinitario. Trinitario cocoa is globally heralded as the world's finest hybrid cocoa. It is indigenous to Trinidad and Tobago, and it is born out of a cross-fertilization of two cocoa varietals, the Criollo and the Forastero. Trinitario cocoa is a main ingredient in Angostura Cocoa Bitters, so it's very important to us. This hybrid variety was bred after a hurricane all but destroyed Trinidad's Criollo plantations in 1727. Forastero seeds from Venezuela, again, our association with Venezuela, were cross-fertilized with the native Criollo beans to create what we know as Trinitario. Trinitario combines the aromatics and sensory virtues of Criollo with the powerful cocoa flavor of Forastero to produce an even more complex, elegant cocoa plant with a depth of flavor that spans from fruity to floral. And while it's now grown around the world, Trinitario from Trinidad continues to be highly revered. The Trinitario name itself translates as of Trinidad. Trinidad and Tobago is designated by the International Cocoa Organization as a 100% fine cocoa producer, a status it has held for decades. The climate and soil of Trinidad and Tobago is well suited to the cultivation of cocoa, and the Trinitario here has a distinctive character that is sought after by chocolatiers the world over. Cocoa, like Angostura, has been such an important part of Trinidad's story for almost 200 years. It's part of our collective cultural heritage, and it's imperative that we protect it. During the golden era of cocoa production on the islands, massive yields of Trinitario were traded for high prices due to growing European demand. Cocoa dominated the economy and benefited the small-scale farmers and the wider community. In the 1830s, Trinidad and Tobago was responsible for 20% of global cocoa production, putting it among the top 3 producers, the world's top 3 producers. This golden era came to an abrupt end in the 1920s due to devastating effects of the Great Depression impacting demand, overproduction in West Africa pushing down global cocoa prices, and witches' boom disease, which devastated local crops. Many small holdings were abandoned as they were just not financially viable, and this labor-intensive industry competed with sugar and oil production for workers. By 1940, Trinidad was producing only 1.6% of the world's cocoa supply, a number that would continue to decline. Today, the productivity of cocoa estates in Trinidad and Tobago is far below the global average. The particularly low yields of cocoa plants and the risk of disease, coupled with the later intensive production process, threaten the financial viability of many small farms and is making farming unsustainable on the islands. Cocoa farming has also become unattractive to the younger generation as a result of these challenges, which poses a threat for continuity and survival of the industry. The high cost of cocoa means Trinidad's cocoa farming is only profitable when targeting the higher end of the market. But thankfully, there's a global growth of interest in single origin, organic, sustainable source cocoa products from increasingly ethically conscious consumers and top chocolatiers. But being able to guarantee a steady supply for those global orders is challenging. So while the launch of Angostura Cocoa Bitters was a huge boost to local farmers, as it is a long-term commitment that gives them the confidence to ramp up production and hopefully inspire a new generation of cocoa producers, challenges such as climate change, low productivity, risk of disease threatens the ability of farmers to absorb the risk in continuing to produce it. Our desire is to only produce cocoa bitters with our own homegrown Trinitario cocoa, as the quality of our local cocoa in Trinidad is what inspired the creation of Angostura Cocoa Bitters after all. Trinitario, as I mentioned before, is known for its bold, fruity characteristics and depth of flavor and aroma, and the nibs are used to add a rich, indulgent, and elegantly balanced flavor to Angostura Cocoa Bitters. So whilst we created demand to assist the industry, we could not ignore the supply issues. So there's a huge, there's a rise of chocolatiers and entrepreneurs in the industry. They use the end product of cocoa, such as cocoa butter, the cocoa nibs, etc., to create cosmetics, to create chocolates, artisan chocolates and stuff. But nobody is really focusing, or there's less focus on the supply issue. So while there's demand and there's continuation of creating demand for cocoa, there's a bigger issue in terms of supply. And if that is not addressed, then years to come, we may not have a cocoa industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So what we did, we needed to work closely with farmers from the very beginning and understand more about the structural issues in the cocoa industry so we can help with solutions that ensure a steady supply commercially and also protect the survival of our prized local Trinitario to see our islands thrive. As I say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Scaling a limited resource in a sustainable way needs a strategy, and this is how we went about it. It wasn't going to be enough to provide consistent demand. That's just one part of the issue, as I said before. Small farmers in our rural communities would need help getting started and mitigating against a very real risk of disease, wiping out potential harvests, and increasing the yields to make the labor-intensive cost of production worth it, plus training and education to utilize the best of modern technology and most effectively. We knew we couldn't do this by ourselves, so what did we do? We listened, we learned, and we sought out the best partners to advise us and help implement a program that will help support the survival of Trinitario cocoa production in Trinidad and Tobago. And with lots of work over many years, this wasn't born overnight, Angostura Cocoa Bitters was not born overnight. Just last Thursday, we unveiled the Angostura Cocoa Bitters Sustainable Future Program. This program is designed to ensure a sustainable future for small-scale organic farmers in Trinidad and Tobago and will empower these producers while protecting and promoting Trinidad's agricultural gem, the Trinitario cocoa. The Angostura Cocoa Bitters Sustainable Future Initiative will focus on farmer education and empowerment, as well as promote the continued quality of Trinidad's Trinitario cocoa on the world stage, captured through digital storytelling and documentary filmmaking. The first part of the program sees us partner with Ubergreen Organics Limited to establish 3 organic cocoa nurseries and clonal gardens. These new nurseries, plantings, will provide local farmers with disease-resistant plants that can yield higher quantities of healthy, quality cocoa fruit. This will be a game changer for many farmers and both increase their income and reduce their risks. Ubergreen Organics will also deliver training to farms on a wide array of topics, including nursery management, organic certification, and the use of new technologies. The 3 cocoa nurseries will help map Trinidad and Tobago's terroir and produce useful data and specific insights about soil conditions, microclimates, and other external factors on tree productivity. The nurseries will make over 1,000 plants available each month and increase the income potential of rural communities. And while education is a big part of it, one of the challenges we have that farmers, the older farmers, they're accustomed farming in a certain way. And so it's very difficult to change their mind. But what they are not taking into consideration is the real impact of climate change. And that is affecting their harvest. So we need to re-educate them. But another challenge is we have the older farmers who are still into cocoa production, but the younger generation is not taking up cocoa production because they don't see the benefit. So our program would help the older farmers change the way they operate so that they can have a more profitable farm and also encourage young entrepreneurs to not just get into the end product of it, but to get at the beginning, the supply issues. So we are assisting with building facilities that help with fermentation, the drying of the cocoa beans. They will have training and education on site. It's not a classroom setting. Farmers will be invited at the facilities, and they'll have training on site. They partnered with a member of the UB Cocoa Research Center, our university, and he developed a grafting technique that is unique and would help them to create new resilient cocoa plants, because that is what is needed with the changes that are taking place. The second part of the Angostura Cocoa Bitters Sustainable Futures Project is a documentary called The Story Behind Trinitario Cocoa, which looks at the challenges and opportunities of the cocoa and chocolate industry in Trinidad and Tobago and examines the risk to the industry due to climate change. Again, this is impacting the industry quite heavily. They usually harvest twice a year. What has been happening is that the harvest is now, sometimes it's later than they originally planned, and this push back the entire production process, and then they can't supply or meet the demands to supply their vendors, and this causes a real problem. So we have to adapt. The farmers have to adapt. They have to employ new technologies so that they can continue to meet the demands that they have. And our program is geared towards assisting them. So, like I said, the program, documentary called The Story Behind Trinidad Cocoa, looks at the challenges and opportunities of the cocoa and chocolate industry in Trinidad and Tobago, and examine the risks to the industry due to climate change and the younger generation seeking opportunities beyond farming. The short documentary aims at to inspire young Trinbagonians to protect the rich cultural heritage of cocoa farming, motivate cocoa farmers to join the organic fine cocoa and chocolate cluster, increase consumers' awareness of the local cocoa industry, and thereby attract more investment into the industry, and stimulate export volumes of cocoa and chocolate products in the international market. The aim of the Angostura Cocoa Bitters Sustainable Futures is to create long-term value in Trinidad and Tobago cocoa industry that is in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals by adding awareness and value to single origin cocoa produce and reducing the cost of production for local farmers through education and increased yields and healthier harvests. There's a huge global consumer demand for unique, single origin, fully traceable, high-quality produce. Trinidad and Tobago has this with the Trinitario cocoa. And it's about time for our golden age of cocoa production to return to the islands, allowing a sustainable future for organic cocoa farmers for generations to come. Thank you.